Anna had always believed in the sanctity of marriage. For 6 years, she had been the perfect wife, supportive, loyal, and fully committed. She was there through every challenge, every late night at work, every moment of doubt her husband Igor had faced. She had built a life with him, not just in financial terms, but in something much deeper: trust, companionship, and an unshakable bond. Their relationship was built on shared dreams, whispered conversations in the dark, and quiet laughter over morning coffee. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, it really helps, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. Sex had never been the defining factor in their marriage, but she had always tried to meet Igor halfway. She had a high drive, always ready to reach for him, to remind him of their connection, but he had been more reserved. At first, she accepted it. She believed love was more than physical touch. He was a hard-working man, ambitious and focused, and she admired that about him. So when weeks passed without intimacy, then months, she told herself it was just a phase. She reassured herself that he loved her, that he was simply tired, that life had become too busy. But the signs had been there, hidden in plain sight. The way he distanced himself, the lack of warmth in his voice, the way he avoided her gaze when she asked if something was wrong. She had ignored it, convincing herself that marriages went through ups and downs. After all, she had never once been tempted by another man. She never even entertained the thought, no matter how many appreciative glances she received from strangers, no matter how many moments she could have used to validate herself, because she had chosen Igor. And she had believed, with every fiber of her being, that he had chosen her just as fiercely. It wasn't until that night, 8 months ago, that her world came crashing down. She hadn't been searching for proof. She wasn't the type of woman to invade her husband's privacy, to go through his messages like a suspicious, paranoid wife. She had trusted him too much for that, but trust had a way of leading you straight into the arms of truth. It had been an accident. A mere glance at his phone screen when he left it unlocked on the kitchen counter. A notification popped up, a name she didn't recognize. The words beneath it made her stomach lurch. "Still thinking about you. Don't ignore me, baby." The world shifted. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the phone, as if touching it would confirm the unbearable. She scrolled, reading messages she was never meant to see. Words of desperation, words of guilt, apologies, and the truth unraveled before her, cruel and undeniable. Igor had cheated, not with passion, not with love, but with something even worse, with a need for validation. The woman had wanted money, but he hadn't given it to her. That detail didn't matter. What mattered was that he had chased after her even when she ignored him. He had let insecurity, stress, and self-doubt drive him into someone else's arms, even when Anna had been right there, willing to hold him. When she confronted him, his excuses felt hollow. "It was a mistake, I wasn't thinking straight, it didn't mean anything." But it had meant something. It had meant everything. He had broken the one thing that couldn't be repaired: trust. And Anna had made one thing clear since the very beginning: she did not forgive cheating. Since that night, everything had changed. The man she had loved for 6 years had become a stranger. They still lived together, still went through the motions of marriage, but there was no warmth, no intimacy, no real conversation. They were distant roommates, bound by shared investments and a past that no longer held any meaning. And the irony of it all? She had never felt this way before. This overwhelming hunger, this unbearable desire, not for him, never for him again, but for something more. Something that burned beneath her skin, something that made her question everything she had believed about herself. She had spent years being faithful, being the devoted wife. Now, for the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to take back what had been stolen from her. To let go, to do something she had never allowed herself to consider. She had spent years being good. Maybe it was time to be something else. Anna sat at the dining table, staring at the man across from her. Igor was eating in silence, his eyes fixed on his plate, chewing like nothing had changed, like he wasn't the reason their marriage had turned into a cold, suffocating prison. The rhythmic clinking of his fork against the ceramic plate was unbearable. He had always been a quiet eater, but now the silence between them was different. Thicker, heavier, filled with everything they weren't saying. She used to love these quiet moments, the domestic simplicity of shared meals after a long day. Now every second in his presence felt like a mockery of what they used to be. She wondered if he felt the weight of it too, but if he did, he didn't show it. He had adapted, moved on. He thought that because she hadn't left, because she hadn't screamed or thrown plates against the wall, that they could continue like this indefinitely. That she had somehow forgiven him, but she hadn't. She never would. The memory of his betrayal played in her mind like a broken record, each replay more infuriating than the last. It wasn't just that he had cheated. It was the way he had done it, the desperation in his messages to that woman, the pathetic need for attention. The way he had kept chasing after her even when she had dismissed him. He had spent their entire marriage treating Anna like she was lucky to have him, like he was doing her a favor by being with her, while secretly groveling for scraps of affection from a woman who hadn't even wanted him. And now, after all that, he had the audacity to act like things could go back to normal. Anna had asked him once, after she had first discovered everything, why he had done it. His answer had been as pathetic as he was. "I don't know," he had muttered, running a hand through his hair like he was the one suffering. "I was stressed. I wasn't feeling good about myself." "You weren't feeling good about yourself," she had repeated, numb. "So you threw away our marriage." It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. He had sighed, rubbing his face as if he was exhausted by the conversation. "I never meant to hurt you." She had laughed then, actually laughed, because that was the thing about betrayal. People always wanted to be excused for their actions, but they never wanted to face the consequences. He hadn't meant to hurt her. What did he think would happen? That she would find out and just, what, move on, smile and pretend it hadn't happened? That had been the last time they had truly spoken. Now, months later, they existed in a strange, unspoken agreement. They didn't fight, but they didn't talk, they didn't touch, they simply existed. Their marriage had become a hollow shell, something dead and rotting that neither of them had the courage to bury. But Anna had plans. She had spent the past months gathering information, preparing herself for the inevitable storm that was coming. She had met with a lawyer, calculated every financial detail, made sure that when she left, she would leave with everything she was entitled to: the house, the investments, the money she had contributed. She had built this life with him, and she would not walk away empty-handed. In the end, she was anxiously awaiting the answer. She had made sure of that. But she wasn't leaving yet, because something inside her refused to let him walk away unscathed. He had taken something from her, something she could never get back, and the thought of him moving on like none of this had ever happened made her physically ill. She wasn't the kind of woman who could just pack her bags and go quietly into the night. No. Igor needed to feel what she felt. He needed to lose something. She wasn't sure what yet, but she would figure it out. Until then, she played the part. She went to work. She smiled when necessary. She kept up appearances. And every night, she lay in bed beside the man who had betrayed her, listening to the sound of his breathing, feeling nothing but disgust. The irony of it all? She had never been more tempted in her life. It wasn't just about sex. It was about power, control. For 6 years, she had been a faithful, devoted wife. She had ignored flirtations, brushed off lingering glances, never once allowing herself to cross a line. But now, with the knowledge of Igor's betrayal burning inside her, she found herself wondering why she had held herself back. Why had she wasted so much time being loyal to a man who hadn't been loyal to her? It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about something deeper, something primal. A hunger that had been buried for years, something she had convinced herself she didn't need. She felt it now, every time she caught a man looking at her a second too long, every time she felt eyes following her when she walked into a room. She had always been beautiful, had always attracted attention, but now, for the first time, she was truly aware of it. She had spent years being good, too good, and for what? A man who had begged for validation from someone else? Igor had gotten to be selfish. He had gotten to take without consequences. But Anna? She had been the good wife, the loyal one. And what had it gotten her? Nothing. So maybe it was time to stop being good. Maybe it was time to take something for herself. Anna had never been the type to act recklessly. Every decision she made was measured, calculated. She had built her life with careful steps, ensuring stability, security, and a future she could rely on. But all of that had been shattered the moment she had discovered Igor's betrayal. Now, there was nothing left to protect. Except herself. She knew she couldn't just walk away. That would be too easy for him. If she left now, he would get to play the victim, to rewrite the narrative, to tell everyone that she had given up on their marriage, while conveniently leaving out the part where he had destroyed it first. No, Igor didn't deserve an easy ending. He deserved to lose something, the way she had lost something. So she planned. She spent her days as if nothing had changed. She went to work, answered emails, smiled at colleagues. She came home, cooked dinner, and sat across from Igor at the table, pretending not to notice the way he avoided her gaze. At night, she lay beside him, her body stiff and cold, waiting for him to finally understand that whatever had once been between them was gone. But in the quiet hours, when he was asleep, Anna worked. The first thing she did was gain access to his accounts. It wasn't hard. Igor had always been careless with his passwords, using the same variations of numbers and letters for everything. She knew his patterns, the way his mind worked. Within minutes, she had logged into his email, his banking, and his work messages. She didn't want to be reckless. If he noticed unusual activity, he would get suspicious. So she took her time, gathering information slowly, taking screenshots, saving everything in an encrypted folder on her personal drive. What she found only fueled her hatred. There were no more messages from the woman he had cheated with. Anna had expected that. But what she hadn't expected was the sheer amount of lies he had been spinning, not just to her, but to everyone around him. Financial transactions that didn't add up, expenses he had never mentioned, business dealings that seemed off. Igor was not just a man who had betrayed his wife. He was a man who had secrets. And secrets had power. The next step was surveillance. Anna didn't trust him. Even though he acted like he had stopped, like he was just trying to rebuild their marriage in silence, she knew better. Once a liar, always a liar. So she took precautions. A hidden camera in his home office, a voice recorder placed in his car, GPS tracking on his phone, installed without his knowledge. She was patient. She didn't rush. She let time do the work, let him relax into his false sense of security. And then, the pieces started falling into place. He wasn't just dishonest. He was still lying. Late-night transactions, secret meetings, conversations he thought she would never hear. He was being careful, but not careful enough. The best part? He had no idea she knew. Anna found herself enjoying the game more than she expected. For so long, she had been the devoted wife, the woman who sacrificed for the sake of love. Now she was something else. Something sharper. The most ironic part was that while she was unraveling Igor's life in the background, she had never been more desired. She noticed it now, the way men looked at her, the way their eyes lingered. She had spent years being blind to it, but now she saw it everywhere. At work, at the gym, even in casual encounters with strangers. It wasn't just about physical attraction. It was the way she carried herself now, the quiet confidence of a woman who had nothing left to lose. She wasn't looking for revenge in the form of another man. Not yet, but the temptation was there, simmering beneath the surface. And Igor? He was too wrapped up in his own deception to notice that his wife had become someone entirely different. But soon, he would. Anna had spent months preparing for this moment. Every step had been deliberate, every move calculated. She had waited in silence, letting Igor believe that time had dulled her pain, that she had resigned herself to their cold, distant cohabitation. She had played her role perfectly. Apathetic, indifferent, the wife who no longer cared enough to fight. But that was the illusion. Beneath the surface, she had been working tirelessly, gathering every piece of evidence she needed, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now, that moment had finally arrived. Igor had been obsessing over this event for weeks. It was more than just another corporate gathering. It was his chance to solidify his position among investors, to showcase himself as a man of success, integrity, and power. He had carefully curated every detail, ensuring that the night would be flawless. He wanted to impress, to charm, to be admired. And Anna had let him. She had listened as he talked about his plans, nodding absent-mindedly, as though she weren't hanging on to every word. She had given him no reason to suspect anything. That was his first mistake. The second mistake was assuming she was still the same woman he had once betrayed. On the night of the event, Anna took her time getting ready. She chose a sleek black dress that hugged her figure, something elegant yet undeniably striking. It was a calculated decision, subtle enough to be appropriate for the occasion, but powerful enough to remind him of what he had thrown away. She applied her makeup with precision, her reflection in the mirror a stark contrast to the woman she had been months ago. Gone was the wife who had once clung to the illusion of their marriage. In her place stood someone entirely different. Someone who held all the power now. By the time she arrived at the venue, the event was already in full swing. The ballroom was filled with influential people, investors, colleagues, and business partners. Soft classical music played in the background, glasses clinked, polite laughter echoed through the air. The entire scene was meticulously crafted, just as Igor had planned. She spotted him almost immediately, standing among a group of executives, wearing the mask of a confident, successful man. He was in his element, effortlessly charming those around him, smiling in that way that had once made her weak. But Anna felt nothing now. No admiration, no longing, just cold, calculated focus. He saw her then, his gaze catching hers across the room. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. She had been distant for months, but tonight she was here. Dressed to perfection, composed and unreadable. He didn't know what to make of it. That uncertainty was the first crack, the first sign of weakness. Anna smiled, just slightly, just enough to make him wonder. She moved through the crowd with ease, exchanging polite greetings, shaking hands, engaging in small talk. She played the role of the supportive wife flawlessly, her presence seamlessly blending into the sophisticated atmosphere of the event. But beneath the surface, her heart pounded in steady anticipation. Everything had been set into motion. All she had to do now was wait. The evening progressed smoothly, just as Igor had planned. Wine flowed freely, conversations grew livelier, and the anticipation for his big moment built. He had worked tirelessly on this presentation, ensuring it would leave a lasting impression. This was his moment to shine. Finally, the time came. The lights dimmed slightly and the crowd gathered near the stage as Igor took his place beneath the warm glow of the spotlight. He straightened his suit, exuding the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. Anna stood at the back of the room, her expression calm, unreadable. He began to speak. His voice was steady, polished. He talked about the company's success, about growth, about vision. And then he spoke of values, of trust, of loyalty, of integrity. Anna almost laughed. The hypocrisy was staggering. And then, as he prepared to introduce the next segment of his presentation, she made her move. The projector screen behind him flickered, the carefully crafted presentation vanishing in an instant. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Igor faltered for just a second, his brow furrowing. The silence stretched, and then the first message appeared. "You make me feel alive again. I don't know what I'd do without you." Gasps filled the room. Conversations halted. Eyes darted between the screen and Igor, who stood frozen in place, his expression shifting from confusion to pure, unfiltered horror. More messages followed. Conversations lifted straight from his phone. "I miss you. When can I see you again? My wife doesn't even look at me like you do. I can't stop thinking about you." The ballroom, once filled with polite chatter, had fallen into complete silence. Igor turned slowly, staring at the screen in disbelief. The color drained from his face as he realized what was happening. Anna didn't need to see his expression to know what he was feeling. He knew. He knew exactly who had done this. And the best part? He couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. For the first time in months, Anna felt truly alive. The room was thick with tension, the kind that made people hold their breath, unsure of what to do next. The polite, cultivated atmosphere of the evening had shattered in an instant, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that stretched on, growing heavier with every passing second. Igor stood beneath the harsh glow of the stage lights, his carefully maintained composure crumbling, his mouth opened slightly as if to speak, but no words came. What could he possibly say? The proof was right there. His own words, his own betrayal, displayed for everyone to see. People in the crowd exchanged glances, murmuring in hushed voices. Some pretended not to look, awkwardly shifting on their feet, while others leaned in closer, unable to tear their eyes away. Anna could see his colleagues whispering amongst themselves, some already pulling out their phones, investors, business partners. Everyone he had wanted to impress were now watching him fall apart in real time. And she wasn't done yet. The messages kept coming. More texts, more proof, the desperate, pitiful attempts he had made to keep another woman's attention. And then, just as planned, the video played. It was a screen recording, a compilation of Igor's late-night conversations, his voice thick with need as he spoke to her. Anna had removed the woman's responses, leaving only his voice, his words, his pathetic groveling. "Please, just answer me. I know I screwed up, but I need to see you. I can't stop thinking about that night. Don't ignore me, baby, please." A wave of disgust rippled through the room. The investors looked particularly displeased. Here was a man who had stood before them minutes ago preaching about trust, loyalty, and discipline, only to be exposed as someone weak, desperate, and utterly unworthy of respect. Anna watched it all unfold from her place in the back of the room, standing perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Inside, her pulse was steady, her satisfaction absolute. Igor snapped out of his frozen state, scrambling toward the laptop connected to the projector, his fingers shaking as he tried to shut it off. But it was too late. She had planned for this. The files had been uploaded in a way that couldn't be interrupted, the content scheduled to play in full before locking him out. Panic flickered in his eyes as he turned toward the crowd, his breath coming in short, uneven gasps. This is a mistake," he stammered. This isn't what it looks like." Someone in the audience scoffed audibly. A few people exchanged amused glances. Others, particularly the older executives, looked at him with outright disappointment. Anna stepped forward then, slowly, deliberately. The sound of her heels clicking against the polished floor was the only thing audible in the vast, silent room. Igor turned his head sharply at the sound, and when he saw her walking toward him, his entire body tensed. He knew, he understood, finally, that this wasn't some accident. This was her. This was revenge. Anna stopped at the edge of the stage, tilting her head slightly as she looked up at him. For a moment, she simply let the weight of it settle, watching him struggle to breathe, to think, to process the reality of what was happening. Then, with practiced ease, she took the microphone from the podium. "Loyalty is an interesting thing, isn't it?" she said, her voice calm, measured. "It's so easy to preach about it, to tell others how important it is, to use it as a way to make yourself look honorable. But loyalty is only real when it's tested." She let her gaze sweep across the crowd before settling back on Igor, who stood stiffly, his fists clenched at his sides. "And as you all just witnessed, my husband failed that test spectacularly?" A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the audience. Some people looked away, unwilling to be caught in the middle of what was clearly a personal matter. Others watched with rapt attention, enthralled by the unfolding scandal. Igor took a step forward, reaching for her arm. "Anna, we need to talk. Now." His voice was low, laced with barely contained panic. She pulled back smoothly, lifting the microphone again. "I don't think so, dear." Her voice was sharp now, cutting through the room like glass. "You've had months to talk, months to explain, months to take responsibility. Instead, you chose silence. You chose to act like nothing happened, like I'd just forget." She turned then, addressing the audience directly. But I don't forget. And I certainly don't forgive. A few quiet gasps, a murmur of intrigue. Igor's face was turning an unhealthy shade of red now. "Stop this," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the microphone. "Right now." Anna smiled, soft, mocking. "Or what?" she asked. "You'll beg?" Laughter erupted then. Real, unrestrained laughter, the kind that bruised a man's ego beyond repair. Igor's breathing turned erratic, his eyes darted across the room, scanning for allies, for someone to step in and rescue him from this nightmare. But no one moved. No one came to his defense, because there was no defense. Anna took one final look at him, drinking in the sight of his ruin. Then she set the microphone down on the podium and walked away, her heels clicking against the floor like the punctuation mark at the end of a perfectly written sentence. She didn't need to see what happened next. She had already won. Anna didn't look back. She stepped out of the venue into the crisp night air, inhaling deeply as if she could finally breathe again. The weight of months of secrecy, planning, and quiet suffering lifted from her shoulders. She had done it. She had taken back her power, and there was no part of her that regretted it. The city lights flickered around her, their glow reflecting in the glass buildings as she walked toward the waiting car. She had arranged everything in advance. Her bags were already packed, moved earlier that day to a sleek apartment on the other side of town. A fresh start, a new life. As she settled into the back seat, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages, calls, some from people who had been at the event, others from mutual acquaintances who had heard about the disaster. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Everyone wanted a piece of the scandal. She ignored them all. Instead, she texted the one person who had been in on her plan from the beginning. "Anna, it's done." A few moments later, the reply came. "Mia, and how do you feel?" Anna stared out the window as the car moved through the city streets. How did she feel? Relieved? Satisfied? Free? Maybe all of the above. Anna, like myself again. Mia sent back a single thumbs-up emoji, followed by a question. "Mia, so what's next?" That was the real question, wasn't it? What came after revenge? By the time she arrived at her new apartment, she still didn't have a clear answer. The doorman greeted her politely, barely reacting as she passed him. Good. No one here knew her. She was anonymous, just another woman moving through the world without baggage, without history. Inside, the apartment smelled new, untouched. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, the space foreign but full of potential. She walked through it slowly, running her fingers along the smooth marble countertops. The floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. For the first time in years, she was alone, and she liked it. She poured herself a glass of wine, sinking into the plush couch as she finally let her body relax. Her mind wandered to Igor. She had left before the chaos settled, but she could imagine it clearly. The humiliation, the fallout, the frantic attempts to salvage what was left of his reputation. He would try to spin the story, make excuses, but the damage had already been done. Investors didn't trust men who couldn't control their own lives. The business world had no patience for weakness. He was finished. The thought should have made her feel victorious, and in a way it did, but more than that, it simply felt complete, as if that chapter of her life had finally, truly ended. She wasn't angry anymore. She was ready to move on. Tomorrow she would wake up in her own space, make coffee in her own kitchen, step into a life that belonged only to her. No more compromise. No more waiting for someone else to choose her, to value her, to love her the way she deserved. She had chosen herself, and that was enough. Anna woke up to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new apartment. The city stretched out before her, a sprawling landscape of endless possibilities. For the first time in years, she felt no weight on her chest, no tightness in her throat. She was free. She took her time getting up, making a cup of coffee and savoring the quiet. No more forced conversations. No more tension-filled dinners with a man she no longer recognized. This space was hers and hers alone. She had spent so long tied to Igor, to the life they had built together, that she had almost forgotten what it was like to exist without him. She scrolled through her phone, ignoring the flood of missed calls and messages from people desperate to dissect last night's scandal. Instead, she focused on the only update she cared about. Mia had sent her a link. Rake. Business executive order minor event. Scandal. Director Bob McKay has used his business agenda during live presentation. Anna clicked on the article, sipping her coffee as she read through the brutal dissection of Igor's downfall. The event had made waves far beyond their usual social circles. Investors were already pulling out. His company's stock had taken a hit. The board was holding an emergency meeting to discuss leadership concerns. Perfect. She could almost picture him now, sitting in his office, scrambling to do damage control, spinning lies to anyone who would listen. He would tell them it was fake, that it had been manipulated, that he was the victim of a malicious attack. But the truth was undeniable. His voice, his messages, his weakness, broadcasted for all to see. Anna didn't just want revenge, she wanted justice. And justice meant ensuring that he lost everything, the way she had once lost everything. She set down her coffee and opened her laptop, pulling up the files she had collected over the past months. The financial discrepancies, the fraudulent transactions hidden behind company expenses, the personal trips disguised as business ventures, the quiet siphoning of funds that, until now, had gone unnoticed. Anna had never cared much for Igor's work before. She had supported him, believed in his success, but she had never paid close attention to the details. But after his betrayal, she had started looking, really looking, and what she found had been even worse than she expected. Now it was time to use it. She crafted the email carefully, attaching the relevant documents, making sure everything was clear and irrefutable. Then, with a steady hand, she sent it directly to the company's board of directors. By the end of the day, Igor wouldn't just be a man with a tarnished reputation. He would be unemployed. Anna spent the rest of the morning in quiet anticipation, knowing that somewhere across the city, Igor's world was beginning to crumble. The fallout from last night's public humiliation had already sent shockwaves through his business and social circles, but the real damage, the kind he could never recover from, was only just beginning. She went about her day as usual, but there was an undeniable sense of calm in her movements. She took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away whatever remnants of the past still clung to her. She made herself breakfast, savoring every bite in the silence of her new apartment. There were no awkward conversations, no heavy silences, no presence lingering around her, making her feel small. Just her freedom, and the knowledge that she had orchestrated the perfect reckoning. By midday, the headlines had changed. Executive Igor Mironov, under internal investigation for financial misconduct. Sources confirm Mironov's position at risk following scandal. Mironov firm's board calls emergency meeting, possible leadership overhaul. Anna scrolled through the articles, each one painting a clearer picture of Igor's downfall. She could see it unfolding in real time, the quiet calls being made, the urgent meetings behind closed doors, the way his colleagues and superiors were slowly but surely distancing themselves from him. She knew how this world worked. The moment you became a liability, you were out. No one was going to risk their reputation defending a man who had so thoroughly embarrassed himself. And she had made sure he wouldn't just be embarrassed. She had given the board everything they needed. Proof of financial fraud, records of company funds being used for personal indulgences, the misallocation of investments. Every questionable transaction, every manipulated report, every shady expense was neatly compiled and sent directly to the people who had the power to end him. And in the corporate world, liabilities weren't given second chances. Her phone buzzed with a new message. Mia is out. Anna exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in. She reread the message, her fingers tightening slightly around the phone. It was done. She imagined the scene unfolding in his office. Igor sitting at the head of the table, face pale, his usual arrogant demeanor cracking as the board members confronted him with the evidence. His voice rising in frustration, his desperation bleeding through as he tried to explain away the undeniable. The moment he realized he had no control left, that every escape route had been cut off. He would have watched as people who once respected him, people who shook his hand, listened to his advice, laughed at his jokes, turned their backs on him, one by one. Anna knew how it felt to have the rug pulled out from under you, to watch something you thought was solid disintegrate in your hands. She had lived through it when she found those messages, when she realized the man she trusted had never truly valued her. But now, it was his turn. She set her phone down and leaned back into the couch, letting her gaze drift toward the city skyline. A quiet, satisfied calm settled over her. For so long she had been filled with anger, with betrayal, with an all-consuming need to make him feel even a fraction of what he had put her through. But now that it had happened, now that Igor had lost everything he had once taken for granted, she didn't feel rage anymore. She felt free. A part of her wondered what he would do next. Would he try to reach out to her? Would he beg, apologize, demand answers? Would he even understand how much damage he had caused? It didn't matter. She had nothing left to say to him. She wasn't the same woman who had once curled up in bed next to him, wondering what she had done wrong. She wasn't the same woman who had ignored the warning signs, who had sacrificed her own needs for a man who had never truly seen her. Anna had walked through fire, through betrayal, through heartbreak, and had come out the other side untouched, stronger, wiser, untouchable. Igor had lost his career, his reputation, his power. Anna, on the other hand, had lost nothing, because she had never needed him to begin with. She picked up her wineglass, took a slow sip, and let a small smile play on her lips. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was finally living